Hi, I'm John Nerrell, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. Now, today, I have a fascinating guest who's here to talk to us about the importance of navigating your career journey by focusing on the hard work that needs to happen regarding your mindset, attitudes, and your outlook as you care for and create whatever is next for your career. Tammy Gooler Loeb is an executive and career coach, speaker, facilitator, and podcast host who helps her clients work from the inside out to help them get the results they desire for their careers. She is passionate about working with clients to help them achieve growth and deeper satisfaction in their careers and work relationships. Tammy brings over 25 years of professional experience to her work and is a certified professional coactive coach by the Coaches Training Institute, a graduate of the Coactive Space Leadership Program, and holds an MBA from Boston University. She's a licensed partner with the Motivation Factor Program and Indicator and was previously selected as one of the top 10 executive coaches by the Readers of Women's Business Boston. Tammy, welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, John. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, same here. And I had such a good time being on your podcast last year that when I launched this one, you were one of those people that I absolutely wanted to have come back on because what you do, and more importantly, your whole career walk and your journey is really fascinating. And I wanted my listeners to get to know you a little bit more. And as we get started today, what I want to know from you at the get-go is, what did you want to be growing up?
Oh, I love that question. So when I was really, really little, I used to tell people that I wanted to be a teacher of the blind and deaf. I was very inspired by Helen Keller and her story. That I think when I was little, the movie came out with I think Patty Duke.
Patty Duke,
was
yeah.
in the movie.
Yep.
And so that tells you how long ago that was. And I remember being very inspired by Helen Keller. Couldn't imagine what it would be like to go through life without being able to hear or see. And it just seemed to me that that would be amazing to be able to help people learn who didn't have the sense of sight or hearing. I didn't become a teacher, though, of the blind and the deaf, but that was one of the first things I thought about doing. I also used to say that I was going to be the first Jewish lady president. I don't know that I ever really meant it the way I meant being a teacher, though. But I clearly had a vision for wanting to help people and make some changes in the world. No doubt about that.
I always love that question too, because it just gives us an insight and takes us back a little bit to when we were kids and what we were thinking about. I mean, for me, it was game show host, meteorologist, and professional bowler. So we chalked off one of those. And so you have this desire to be a teacher, obviously leadership roles and leadership capacity. What was it like for you after college and starting work, and talk to us a little bit about what that part of your career walk was like?
Sure. So I majored in psychology, and I was fascinated by a course I took in undergrad. It was a seminar on manic depressive illness.
Hmm.
And I was fascinated by all the different kinds of mental illnesses and the ways in which people's minds would be altered. And that sounds kind of funny coming out of college that I was interested in mind altering things, and it wasn't about recreational activities. But I ended up working in the field of community mental health for several years after college. This was during a period of time in the early 80s when deinstitutionalization was a fairly big movement, at least in Massachusetts. It certainly was, which is where I was living. And they were literally emptying out the large state psychiatric institutions and placing psychiatric patients, long-term, chronically mentally ill patients, and putting them into community-based settings to help what they called normalize them. And I worked in a program where we were working with a group of adults in an apartment building. And I would provide some, not therapy, but some kind of low-level counseling and other socialization activities. It was very good work. It was very interesting. I think it was an interesting experiment, but I don't know that it was necessarily altogether good for these folks. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying institutionalization was good for them either, but it seemed like there was something missing in the middle, because you take somebody out of the only life that some of these folks knew for 30, 40 years of their lives, and all of a sudden they're out in the community and they don't know how to function in that environment. And our job was to help them, but it was still quite a dramatic shift. So at that point, I was very, very curious about how these programs were getting funded. And I knew what I was making for a salary, and I knew what kinds of resources were going into these initiatives. And it seemed to me that the resources were sparse, and that there was a lot of people that weren't really getting their needs met out in the community. And so I decided to move to Boston, the state capital, and get a job in public policy, because I thought I need to find out how these policies are made and how these programs are being funded. So I kind of switched over into the public policy arena at that point, not really knowing what public policy was. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what it was, but I was going into public policy. And I landed in Boston, and I knew a couple of people who actually worked in the mayor's office, and spoke with them. And they told me that the mayor had just hired a new cabinet member who was his senior advisor on human services and public health. And I met the guy. They introduced him to me, and he was going to be able to hire an assistant. And so I applied for the role. Took about 6 months, but I got hired into that role. And so for the next 4 years, I worked in the mayor's office, working on all kinds of policy issues. And it was some of the most fascinating work I ever did. It was also a very political environment too. And that's a whole nother story, but it was quite different than working in the community with, people who were very, very vulnerable. So,
and we think about those jobs that we've held and what happens when we're first starting out. And then we all get, if we're lucky, right? We all get to this mid-career point, right? And we start trying to put the pieces together as we navigate from one thing into the next. Mm-hmm. I've talked before on the podcast about what I like to define as this mid-career moment. It's that moment where you wake up and you go, I need to be doing this. Yep. I'm most valued here. Mm-hmm. I am going to make my greatest impact doing this. Mm-hmm. What was your mid-career moment that really helped set you up for what you're doing now?
Oh, it's a great question. So I was probably in my late 30s. And I had somehow emigrated into doing fundraising work.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was not a great fit for me. And I knew that I needed to get back to some kind of more direct service, human service related work. And I, in the meantime, had gotten an MBA. So I already had a master's degree, but I thought, oh, maybe I need another master's degree. Maybe I need a master's in counseling or social work or something. But I wasn't quite sure. And then I heard about this field. It was kind of a new-ish field. It was called life coaching. And there were a handful of programs out there that were teaching this. And I was introduced to a coach, sat down with her and talked with her about her work and the program that she did. And it just landed. It was like a thump. And I thought, that's it. Coaching. I need to become a coach. I think I probably did, a ton of research in a very, very short period of time. I found the coactive coaching program. That was the one I wanted. I mean, it was like a whole succession of things that just landed for me, that just felt right in my gut. And then I enrolled in the courses and I took each course month after month. There were weekend courses. And I was flying all over the place to catch the courses in succession in the right cities where they were being offered. That's how badly I wanted to do this. It was almost like I was possessed.
Right.
And I'd say it took me about a year between taking the courses and then doing their 6-month certification program. And then I was a certified coactive coach. So in the meantime, I also was holding a part-time job, kind of as a bit of a financial anchor. I was also married at the time, had a young child. So I had another income coming in. So it wasn't like, oh, I was just, working part-time and flitting around the country taking courses. But what I did was I worked part-time, still doing some of the fundraising work. And then on the other part-time, I started building a coaching practice. And then it reached just a critical mass where I was able to, maybe around the age of 40 or so, I was able to then leave my part-time job and go full-time on my own.
It is fascinating. And I think this is something where we can all relate to it on some level when that thing clicks.
Mm-hmm.
When we get that clarity around, this is what I'm meant to do. And if you haven't had that moment, it's coming.
Yes.
Right? It is definitely coming. And one of the things I love about you and the work that you do is you focus so much on that mindset and the deep inner work that you and I have talked about before, but is also just a huge part of your podcast called Work from the Inside Out. And so talk to me a little bit about, like, what does it mean to you to do the work from the inside out?
What it means to me, John, is that when you're doing work that really fulfills you, is really meaningful to you, it comes from some kind of a intrinsic motivation or inner core within you. So, for example, a lot of people start their careers, not everybody, but a lot of people have been told growing up or by, well-intentioned adults, oh, you're good at this or you're good at that, or you should become a thus and such. And so a lot of people went off to college, studied, a discipline perhaps that they were either just interested in or something that their parents or other adults told them, you should study this. And then they get out of school and they go into that profession thinking that they're going to follow some kind of linear path of progressions and promotions in a field. And then They hit 35, 38, 40 years old, and they wake up one morning and they realize, I'm really not that happy. I might even be downright miserable. And they realize, I'm good at what I do. I make a good living, but I don't like what I'm doing. And that's working from the outside going in, because everything that you've done from a place of all the external inputs telling you what you're good at or what you should do, versus checking in with yourself and really getting to know yourself and figuring out what really lights you up. And so, I would say for my own case, most of what I did, even up to the point of becoming a coach, I tried to always look inside myself to see what would light me up, what came from a more internal motivation that interested me. And I had to try a lot of different things before I found the thing that really felt right to me. And I think that's true for a lot of people. But you have to be open to it. You have to look for it. It's not going to just, even coaching, it didn't just fall out of the sky and hit me in the head. I was in the process of being open to those possibilities and looking for something. So, I think that there are those very fortunate people who, from, age 5 onward will say, since I was 5, I've always wanted to be a this or a that. And they grow up and they become that thing, and that's it their whole lives. But I would say that that's the exception.
Well said. And from your experience, what gets people stuck in their careers?
Fear. Fear of all kinds of things, right? So fear and maybe a sense of greater responsibility for other people, or fear of what other people will think. And I think also what comes out of that fear might be that they're not trusting themselves. They stop believing that they can do something else. Or, they're afraid of what might happen if they make a change. So all the what ifs, but underlying all of that is fear. And if they could recognize what that fear is about, knowing that really the fear is a made up story, because they don't know what would happen if they actually dipped a toe in the water of some new territory that might be really, really engaging and fulfilling and meaningful to them.
I gotta lean in on what you just said there, because to go back to that, the fear is that made up story. How many times, and I know I've been guilty of it, right? How many times do we allow that fear to feel like it's the truth with the capital T, even though it's not?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we ruminate and perseverate on all of these things that are coming up for us, whether our boss doesn't like us, or I didn't get the bonus, so therefore I'm not valued, or this client is awful and it's because, and we make up some reason instead of really trying to figure out what is the truth with the capital T instead of truth with the small t.
That's right. Absolutely, John. And we really do believe that we are telling ourselves the truth. And sometimes it's that same lie that's founded in fear that we keep telling ourselves, so much so that it becomes a truth for us because we've been telling ourselves that for so many years. I mean, think about, your listeners will identify this as someone they know, or maybe in themselves. The person who has been told their whole lives, make sure you have a roof over your head, food on the table, and 6 months worth of living expenses in the bank. If you don't, you're irresponsible, right?
Right.
And look, I agree, you should have all those things. But who's to say that you can't have those things and be deliriously happy in the work you're doing at the same time? I've just seen so many people who are dialing it in every day. They're getting up, they're going to a job, and it's just a job. And yeah, they're driving a nice car and they live in a bigger house and they've got the 2.3 children and, the spouse and the whole thing. But they're spending 20, 30 years of their lives doing something they really don't really enjoy.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. And there's research that shows this too. I mean, we know that at least 70% of employees do not feel particularly engaged at work. That's a sad statistic.
Absolutely. And from your lens, Tammy, what have been some of the biggest things you have seen as a result of the pandemic a year later, after this whole thing started and the world kind of stopped and changed and pivoted and shut down and reopened and everything? What are some of the things that you're seeing from your lens about how the pandemic has just shaped the way we think about our careers right now?
Well, I've seen a few different things. So I see more made up stories about, oh, well, it's harder to get a job now because of the pandemic. I, in my experience, have not seen that it's harder. I've seen that the process seems to be slower.
Mm-hmm.
That for the most part, when people apply for work, it does seem like it takes a lot longer to hear from people for interviews. I'm not sure if that's even totally true, but it does seem that way. But I will also tell you that I've had many, many, many clients get jobs during the pandemic. And even jobs in fields I would have thought would have been the fields that would not be hiring right now. So I even was surprised by some of that. Some of my presumptions were even, shattered, so to speak. So I think that, it's like when people say around the holidays or in the summer, oh, well, things slow down around the holidays.
Yeah.
I just took those weeks off. I didn't bother looking. And I say, never stop looking. In fact, the holidays are a great time to look for a job because half the world thinks it's time to stop. So
exactly,
you're competing with fewer people. But, people haven't stopped working. They're just working from home. Life has been much, much harder for a lot of people. There's no doubt about it. But the world has not stopped completely. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we've made up about what this pandemic has or hasn't done to us. We know that it's been really bad for a lot of people. But when you think about it, if you're one person looking for one opportunity, then think about it that way and go for it.
Right.
Pandemic or no pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and especially a year out where on some level things have settled in.
Yeah.
Right. So for the companies who thought they couldn't be as effective working remotely, more than likely have proven otherwise.
In fact, in some cases, they have realized that some people are working more effectively.
Yes.
And some companies have actually terminated their leases on their office space and are allowing employees to work from home permanently. Right. There's all kinds of, and then I've also heard stories of leaders and managers who've said they were really worried about how they were going to be able to, manage their people. And they've found that people are getting the work done very well from home. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sure that's not the case everywhere, but there's all kinds of dynamics that have occurred as a result of people working from home that have actually been beneficial for people. I think it's a double-edged sword, right? There's been a lot of problems that have been devastating, and I don't want to minimize those. But I also don't want to downplay that there have actually been some bonuses that have occurred. as a result of people working from home. And, for some people, it's actually worked out quite well. Unfortunately, on the heels of a tragic pandemic.
Agreed and well said. And we know that there are certain industries that have been decimated and will take a
Absolutely.
long time to come back, right?
Right.
Travel, hospitality, entertainment,
Yes.
food services, um, even the local transportation in terms of
Yeah.
subways or metro or things like that, where
Right.
the mass volumes of people are not operating or traveling at the same rate at which they were. And perhaps there will come a time when, as we reopen, we will revisit the whole work travel conversation and what
Right.
those things kind of look like. But to your point, and I loved what you said there, if you're one person looking for one opportunity, you can either have that mindset about like, it is absolutely possible for me to find something.
Yeah.
It may take a little bit longer than expected. It may not necessarily be in the field of choice or be the dream job,
Right.
but there are opportunities that are out there. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're positioned very strategically in the marketplace and the work that we get to do with our clients,
Yeah.
that can certainly help.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say, anyone who has a decent work history and a few skills in their, in their toolkit, there's always a way to make money and bring in cash.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of short-term ways to do that these days. We live in this gig economy. There's tons of ways to make a few dollars. I don't think that's what we're talking about here necessarily, but if people are worried about survival, there's lots of ways to do that. I think a lot of people don't know even how to do that. And that's why we have a lot of people
Mhm.
who are, really suffering and feeling, you know, out of sorts when it comes to that and are standing on long lines or sitting in their cars in long lines waiting for food and all kinds of
Right.
things, taking care of their families. Those are people who definitely don't want to be there, but there are a lot of options that I think a lot of people don't know about.
And I as I'm talking to people too, and I will always say to them, and I'm going to ask you the same question here too, which is that what have you learned as a result of the pandemic? How, as more specifically, how have you grown as a professional as a result of the pandemic?
I have learned, um, I've learned about focus and attention.
Mm-hmm.
I have written a book during this pandemic. I was planning on writing the book anyway, um, but I I really learned far more about how to how to focus my energy and what it means to really put together a work day and channel my attention and my energy in different ways, because I've been working from home for a long time now. But all of a sudden, I had for 6 months, I had two other people in the house with me. And so it really shifted everything around. So I learned a lot about how to sit down and write for periods of time and I also discovered myself as a writer. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think of myself as an author and a writer before. I've done writing. I've even written articles that have been published, but I'd never sat down and written like that before. So understanding and learning about the creative process in that way has been tremendous. So focusing and getting creative and writing, it's been wonderful in that way.
So, what's your book about?
So my book is all about career transitions,
Nice.
and it's all about the fear and all the things that get in the way of people making those pivots or those moves into career transitions. And it's highlighting a number of people that I've either worked with as a coach, people I've known in my life. Some of them are my podcast guests, and looking at all the different things that get in the way, and then telling stories of people who have moved beyond those barriers to find careers or to engage in work that is more fulfilling and meaningful for them.
It sounds like a really good read.
Yeah, it'll be out hopefully in May 2021.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to that and reading that. And so, hey, as we wrap up here, Tam, a couple of questions for you. What would you say is the most valuable lesson you have learned throughout your mid-career specifically?
I love that question. So, I think the most valuable thing that I have learned is to not take things too personally. So that sounds very simple and very easy. It's not. Mm-hmm. Because, we're in a business where we're we're in a business where we're always looking for our next job, right, John?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so, constantly being hired by clients and being kind of sized up, so to speak, to be hired by new clients. And, it used to be that I would get disappointed if someone didn't hire me, or I'd hope to get, another gig or some consulting. And now I approach each situation with a positive attitude, but I remain unattached to the outcome. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I don't care. I care, but I'm unattached to what happens as a result of that interaction or that effort I put into, let's say, getting that job or that gig. And the same thing goes with the book that's coming out. I don't know how the book will be received. I have to be unattached to how that comes about. I'll be delighted if people like it and get something out of it. Absolutely. But if I start to attach my ego, so to speak, to all of that, it'll destroy me. And I won't be able to go forward in a powerful way, or in a way that really helps me be my best. So I've really learned to kind of be somewhat unattached, or not take things too personally, and realize we're all just trying to do our best. And sometimes people will respond to us in ways that maybe we don't want them to, but it's often more a reflection of them than it is about us.
You just gave me all the feels on that, because we have talked before on the podcast about not being attached to the outcome and how hard that can be. And to hear that from you in the work that you're doing and building and creating, it is definitely something that is easier said than done, but a true reflection about the work that we all get to do around coming from that place of service, in writing a book and in service to your readers and who's ever going to pick that up, that mm-hmm. they're going to get something from your book and the time mm-hmm. that you've put into that is going to help them and elevate them in a world where, I sound like that guy from the movies, in a world where, right? but in a world where a lot of people look for that viral moment or that thing that catches on. To come from that place of being completely unattached from the outcome, I think that's some of the most powerful work we can do.
And it's liberating. It really it frees you up to move on to the next thing, and it frees you up to be more available, to be of service, and to help more people. And that kind of freedom is joyful. But it took me a while to get there, but now that I've experienced it, I don't want to ever let it go. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that I don't ever get a little hurt or a little upset. I'm human. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I would say that's it. That's it. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to mention that the title of my book is Your Career is an Inside Job.
Oh, I love that. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to make sure we get all of that in the show notes and that your website and stuff like that people can connect with. But please tell my listeners how people can specifically connect with you today.
Oh, thank you. Well, the best way to connect with me is to find me at my website, which is a bit of a mouthful, but there's nobody else who has a name like mine. So it's www.tammygoolerloeb.com. And if you try to type that into Google, I'm sure somewhere along the way I will come up.
Yes. As I have done and can attest to that. Yes. And who are the people you specifically help in your coaching practice?
I work with people who are mostly people who are mid-career, later career, but I will tell you that I've always, I've aimed for that. And yet every so often, somebody who's quite a bit earlier in their career will come my way. And there's just a point of readiness that they're at for coaching, and they will dazzle me and I will take them on as a client. So I'm pretty open to speaking to anybody who is ready for some type of a change, either, when it comes to career, looking for a new opportunity, or people who are in a job already or working at the executive level and are trying to make a shift or a change or trying to improve something and are really trying to become their best selves at work. So I've worked with people, from the very beginning, right out of school, all the way through to executive level.
Nice.
And, but I think that the key is that I really work with people who are really ready to roll up their sleeves and do the work.
Nice. Well, and let's not forget your fantastic podcast called Work from the Inside Out, which you can find Apple Podcasts, wherever people listen. But what episode are you at now?
It's been out for over 2 years now. It's a weekly podcast, and I'm up to, I think, episode 115 or 116, something like that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on
Thanks.
that. And you've had some great guests on. I've enjoyed listening. I was honored to be a guest as well.
You're a great guest.
Well, thanks. And I'm glad that you and I got some chance to just reconnect today and spend some time, and so proud of you and excited for you about your book and everything you've got going. So Tammy Gooler Loeb, thank you so very much.
Thank you, John.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of the day, and I will see you soon with another episode. Take care of yourself and be well. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen. If you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you would leave me a rating and review to let me know what you think, to help others find this podcast and continue to bring you relevant and useful content to help you navigate what's next for your career. And if you're ready to create your mid-career GPS and get rid of the overwhelm so you can find the job you'll love or love the job you have, visit my website at johnnarrell.com for more information about joining my private Facebook group and scheduling a free consult with me so we can start building your mid-career GPS together. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narrell Coaching. I'll see you next time.